Have you ever known anyone who said, "My bad habits are killing me," and they smiled when they said it? No, they don't smile. They cry, they weep. Because bad habits rob us of our productivity, our happiness, and ultimately, our future. The problem with bad habits is that they're comfortable, they're easy. Someone once told me, "Jim, I've got 20 years of bad habits." And I said, "No, you've got one day of bad habits, repeated 7,300 times. That's the challenge we face. But today I want to give you 5 powerful ways to break those bad habits before they break you. These aren't just ideas, they're strategies that have changed thousands of lives. And they can change yours too. 1. The power of awareness. Identify your triggers. The first step to breaking any bad habit is awareness. You've got to become acutely aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Most people sleepwalk through their habits. They don't even realize what they're doing until after they've done it. The candy bar is already eaten. The angry words are already spoken. The work is already procrastinated. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Let me tell you something profound. You cannot change what you do not acknowledge. Awareness is the beginning of change. So here's what I want you to do. For the next 7 days, I want you to become a scientist of your own behavior. Carry a small notebook with you, and every time you engage in the habit you want to break, write it down. Note the time, the place, what happened just before, and how you felt afterward. What you'll discover will amaze you. Patterns will emerge. Maybe you reach for those cigarettes when you're stressed. Maybe you procrastinate when you feel overwhelmed. Maybe you overeat when you're lonely. A client of mine, a successful executive, discovered through this exercise that he checked his email 47 times in one day. And each time it broke his concentration and set him back. No wonder he couldn't get his important work done. You see, bad habits don't exist in isolation. They're triggered by something. It might be a time of day, a certain place, a particular emotion, or even specific people. These triggers are like tripwires that set off your bad habits almost automatically. I remember working with a gentleman who couldn't figure out why he always stopped at the bar on his way home from work. Through awareness, he realized that a certain intersection was his trigger. When he reached that intersection, he would almost unconsciously turn toward the bar. Once he identified this trigger, he could create a plan. He started taking a different route home, and the habit lost its power. Isn't that fascinating? Sometimes the simplest awareness can lead to the most profound change. But here's the key. Don't judge yourself during this awareness phase. Be a neutral observer. If you beat yourself up every time you notice your bad habit, you'll train yourself to stop noticing. Just observe and record. That's it. I once heard a story about a monk who was asked how he achieved enlightenment. He said, "When I eat, I eat. When I walk, I walk. When I sleep, I sleep." That's awareness, being fully present in whatever you're doing, rather than operating on autopilot. So many of us go through life on autopilot. We're physically present, but mentally absent. And that's where bad habits thrive, in that gap between our actions and our awareness. Let me tell you a personal story. Years ago, I noticed that I had developed a habit of negative self-talk. Whenever I made a small mistake, I would mentally berate myself. I wasn't even aware of it until I deliberately started paying attention. And once I became aware, I was shocked at how often I did it. That awareness was the first step toward changing that habit. So remember, awareness precedes change. You cannot transform what you do not first acknowledge. Become the scientist of your own behavior, and you'll gain the insights you need to move forward. 2. The philosophy of replacement. Substitute, don't eliminate. Now, here's the second key to breaking bad habits, and it's one that most people miss. You don't actually break bad habits. You replace them. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you try to simply eliminate a bad habit without putting something better in its place, you're fighting a losing battle. The human mind doesn't work that way. Here's a fundamental truth. Every habit serves a purpose. Even your bad habits are meeting some need in your life, however dysfunctional they may be. Maybe overeating helps you cope with stress. Maybe procrastination helps you avoid the fear of failure. Maybe checking your phone constantly gives you a sense of connection. If you just try to stop these behaviors without addressing the underlying needs, the habits will come roaring back the moment your willpower wavers. So the question isn't, how do I stop this habit? The question is, what could I do instead that would fulfill the same need in a healthier way? I worked with a writer once who had a terrible habit of procrastination. Every time he sat down to write, he'd find himself cleaning his desk, checking email, making coffee, anything but writing. We discovered that the root of his procrastination was fear that what he wrote wouldn't be good enough. So instead of just trying to force himself to write, which never worked, he replaced his procrastination routine with a new routine. Before writing, he would spend 5 minutes free writing anything that came to mind, with the explicit understanding that no one would ever see it. This addressed his need for safety while still moving him toward his goal. Within weeks, his productivity doubled. The bad habit was replaced, not eliminated. Here's another example. I know a man who was trying to quit smoking. He tried everything: cold turkey, nicotine patches, even hypnosis. Nothing worked long term. Then he realized that smoking gave him regular breaks in his day, a chance to step outside and clear his head. So instead of just trying to stop smoking, he scheduled 3 10-minute walks throughout his workday. These walks fulfilled the same need for breaks while supporting his health rather than harming it. The replacement strategy worked where willpower alone had failed. This principle of replacement is powerful because it works with your psychology rather than against it. It acknowledges that the habit was serving a purpose and finds a better way to serve that same purpose. So take that awareness you developed in step 1 and now ask yourself, what need is this habit meeting for me? And what could I do instead that would meet that same need in a healthier way? Maybe instead of reaching for junk food when you're stressed, you could call a friend or go for a quick walk. Maybe instead of checking social media when you're bored, you could keep a fascinating book nearby. Maybe instead of drinking to relax after work, you could take a hot bath or practice meditation. The possibilities are endless, but the principle is consistent. Replace, don't just eliminate. Remember, the question is not whether you'll have habits. You will. The only question is which ones you'll have. Make sure they're ones that serve your higher goals and values. 3. The discipline of environment designed for success. The third strategy for breaking bad habits is something I call environmental design, and is perhaps the most overlooked and underrated approach. Here's a truth that may surprise you. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. Let me say that again. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. We like to think that breaking bad habits is all about personal strength and discipline. But the research is clear. The environment you place yourself in has a profound effect on your behavior. Think about it this way. If you're trying to quit eating sweets, but your pantry is stocked with cookies and your freezer is full of ice cream, you're setting yourself up for failure. Every time you open that pantry, you're forcing yourself to make a choice. And when you have to make the same choice over and over again, willpower eventually runs out. But what if there were no sweets in the house? You'd have to get in your car, drive to the store, select the sweets, purchase them, and drive back home before you could indulge. That's a lot of friction, and friction is your friend when it comes to breaking bad habits. I remember working with a young entrepreneur who was struggling with a social media addiction. He was checking his phone hundreds of times a day, and it was destroying his productivity and creativity. We tried various strategies, but what finally worked was environmental design. He simply deleted all social media apps from his phone. If he wanted to check social media, he had to use his laptop, which he kept in his office. Just that small change in his environment reduced his social media use by 70% in the first week. That's the power of environmental design. It's about arranging your surroundings so that good behaviors are easy and bad behaviors are hard. If you want to exercise more, put your running shoes by the door. If you want to read more, keep a book on your pillow. If you want to eat healthier pre-cut vegetables and keep them at eye level in your refrigerator, make the good choice the easy choice. Conversely, if you want to break a bad habit, add friction, put your phone in another room when you're working, keep junk food out of the house, cancel subscriptions to services that waste your time. This isn't about relying on willpower, it's about reducing the need for willpower in the first place. I once visited the home of one of the most disciplined men I know. I expected to find an environment of rigid structure, but what I found instead was brilliant design. His home was arranged in a way that naturally facilitated good habits. Healthy food was prominent in his kitchen. Books were everywhere. His workout equipment was right there in his living room. His environment was doing much of the work of maintaining his good habits. This approach is so effective because it acknowledges a fundamental truth about human nature. We tend to take the path of least resistance. So make sure that path leads somewhere you want to go. Now you might be thinking, but Jim, I can't always control my environment. And you're right. You can't control everything, but you can control more than you think. You can't keep junk food out of the house because you live with others. Get a locked cabinet for your own healthy snacks. Can't avoid the bar in your commute home? Take a different route. Can't escape the negative influence of certain people. Limit your exposure and deliberately seek out positive influences to counterbalance them. The point is to control what you can control and design your environment to support your goals rather than undermine them. Remember, your willpower is limited. Your habits are shaped by your environment more than by your intentions. Design an environment that makes good choices easy and bad choices hard, and you'll find that breaking bad habits becomes remarkably easier. 4. The strategy of accountability. Leverage social pressure. The fourth way to break bad habits before they break you is through the power of accountability. And this one, my friends, this one can change everything. See, we're social creatures. We care what others think of us. We want to be seen as reliable, as people who keep their word. And when we make a commitment only to ourselves, it's easy to break it. But when we make that same commitment to someone else, something powerful happens. Let me illustrate this with a story. I once worked with two friends who both wanted to write a book. Both were equally talented, equally motivated. One worked alone. The other joined a writing group where members shared their weekly page counts. Guess which one finished their book? That's right, the one with accountability. The one who knew that others were expecting results. The one who would have to explain any lack of progress. This isn't about shame or punishment. It's about leveraging our social nature for positive change. So here's what I want you to do. Find an accountability partner. This should be someone you respect, someone whose opinion matters to you. Tell them specifically which habit you're trying to break and what you're doing instead. Then commit to regular check-ins. These check-ins are crucial. Set a specific time, maybe every Monday morning when you report your progress. The simple knowledge that you'll need to have that conversation can be incredibly motivating during moments of temptation. A client of mine was trying to break his habit of working late into the evening, which was damaging his family relationships. He found an accountability partner at work, and they agreed to text each other at 6:30 p.m. each day. If my client was still at the office, he had to explain why to his colleague. Within 3 weeks, he was leaving work on time almost every day. The habit was changing because he had leveraged accountability. But there's another level to this strategy, and it's even more powerful. Don't just find an accountability partner, find a whole community. When you surround yourself with people who are practicing the habits you want to adopt, those habits start to seem normal. They become part of your identity. There's a saying that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Make sure those 5 people are pulling you in the right direction. If you want to quit drinking, join a group like where sobriety is the norm. If you want to exercise regularly, join a running club or a fitness class where everyone shows up consistently. If you want to be more productive, find a mastermind group of high-achieving professionals. The power of community is that it changes your reference point for what's normal. Bad habits that seem challenging to break on your own become much easier to change when you're surrounded by others who have already broken them. I've seen this in my own life. When I first started in the personal development field, I was inconsistent in my reading habits. But then I began associating with people who read a book a week. Suddenly, my occasional reading seemed inadequate. Without even trying that hard, I found myself reading more because that was the norm in my new circle. Now, a word of caution. This works in both directions. If you're trying to break a bad habit, but you regularly spend time with people who engage in that habit, you're fighting an uphill battle. You may need to temporarily distance yourself from certain influences while you're establishing new patterns. I'm not saying you need to end friendships, but you might need to be strategic about where and when you see certain people or activities you engage in together. Remember, environment shapes behavior, and the people around you are a critical part of your environment. So find accountability. Make specific commitments to specific people. Surround yourself with a community that normalizes the habits you want to adopt. Let the power of social pressure work for you rather than against you. 5. The art of identity. Become someone new. Now we come to the 5th and perhaps most profound strategy for breaking bad habits, the transformation of identity. Most people approach habit change at the level of behavior. They focus on what they do. But the deepest, most lasting change happens at the level of identity, who you are. Let me explain what I mean. Every one of us has a story about who we are. I'm a procrastinator. I have a sweet tooth. I'm not a morning person. These stories seem like objective descriptions of reality, but they're actually creating that reality. The stories you tell yourself about who you are drive your behavior far more powerfully than your conscious intentions. So if you want to change your habits permanently, you need to change your story. You need to change your identity. Instead of saying, I'm trying to quit smoking, say, I'm not a smoker. Instead of saying, I'm trying to exercise more, say I'm an athlete. Instead of saying, I'm trying to stop procrastinating, say, I'm someone who takes immediate action. This isn't just semantics. It's a profound shift in how you view yourself. And when your actions align with your identity, they no longer require willpower. They flow naturally from who you believe yourself to be. I remember working with a gentleman who had struggled with his weight for decades. He had tried every diet, every exercise program. Nothing stuck long term. Then one day he had what he described as an epiphany. He realized that all this time he had been thinking of himself as an overweight person trying to lose weight. But what if, he wondered, he started thinking of himself as a fit, healthy person who temporarily gained some weight? That shift in identity changed everything. His food choices, his exercise habits, they weren't a struggle anymore because they aligned with his new self-image. Within a year, he had transformed his body and his health, and more importantly, it lasted. So how do you change your identity? It starts with making a decision about who you want to be. Not what you want to do or what you want to have, but who you want to be. Once you've made that decision, you need to start acting in alignment with that new identity immediately, even in small ways. Every time you act in accordance with your new identity, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. If you decide, I'm the kind of person who is always on time, and then you show up 5 minutes early to your next meeting, you've cast a vote for that identity. Do it again and again, and soon that identity becomes stronger than the old one. This is why small wins are so important in the beginning. They're not just progress toward your goal, they're evidence that builds your new self-image. A woman I worked with wanted to become more assertive. She had a habit of agreeing to things she didn't want to do and then resenting it later. We worked on shifting her identity from I'm a people pleaser to I'm someone who honors her own boundaries. The first time she politely declined a request that would have overextended her, it was terrifying. But it was also exhilarating. It was evidence that her new identity was real, not just an aspiration. Each subsequent boundary she set became easier because it aligned with who she now saw herself to be. This identity-based approach to habit change explains why some people can make dramatic changes seemingly overnight. Think of someone who quits smoking cold turkey after years of addiction, or someone who has a health scare and completely transforms their diet. What happened? Their identity shifted dramatically, and their behaviors natural followed. Now, for most of us, identity change is more gradual. It happens through consistent small actions that build a new self-image over time. But the principle is the same. Change who you are, and what you do will follow. So ask yourself, who do I need to become to naturally break this bad habit? What would that kind of person do? How would they think? How would they talk about themselves? Then start being that person today in small ways at first, but with absolute conviction. Cast votes for your new identity through your actions and watch as what once required willpower becomes simply who you are. Putting it all together, the synergy of the 5 strategies. Now, I've given you 5 powerful strategies for breaking bad habits. But here's the thing, you don't have to choose just one. In fact, they work best when used together, creating a synergy that's far more powerful than any single approach. Let me show you how these strategies can work together in practice. Imagine you have a habit of checking your phone constantly, and it's affecting your productivity, your relationships, and your peace of mind. How would you apply all 5 strategies? First, awareness. You track when and why you check your phone. Maybe you discover that you reach for it whenever you feel a moment of boredom or discomfort, or when you're procrastinating on a challenging task. Second, replacement. Instead of trying to simply stop checking your phone, you'd establish a new habit to meet the same needs. Perhaps when you feel the urge to check your phone, you take 3 deep breaths instead, or jot down a quick thought in a notebook. Third, environmental design. You'd put your phone in another room while working. You'd turn off notifications. You download an app that limits your screen time. You'd make the bad habit harder and the good habit easier. Fourth, accountability. You tell a friend about your goal and ask them to check in with you. Maybe you join a digital minimalism group where others are working on the same challenge. Fifth, identity shift. You'd start thinking of yourself not as someone trying to use their phone less, but as a person who is fully present, or someone who values deep work and deep relationships over digital distraction. Can you see how powerful this combined approach would be? Each strategy reinforces the others, creating a comprehensive system for change. And that's what it's really about, creating systems, not just setting goals. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. And when it comes to habits, systems always win. I've taught these principles to thousands of people over the years, and I've seen the transformations they can create. I've seen alcoholics become sober. I've seen procrastinators become productive. I've seen the angry become peaceful, the disorganized become efficient, the negative become positive. The change isn't always easy, and it isn't always quick, but it is always possible. Always. And here's something else I've noticed. When people break a significant bad habit, it often creates a ripple effect in their lives. They develop a new sense of personal power. They start to wonder, if I could change this, what else could I change? They begin to see themselves as people who can shape their own destiny rather than victims of their conditioning. That's the true gift of mastering your habits, not just the specific improvement in behavior, but the expanded sense of what's possible in your life. So let me leave you with this thought: your habits are not your destiny. They're just the residue of your past choices. And with the right strategies, with awareness and replacement, with environmental design and accountability, with a powerful new identity, you can make different choices today that will create a different destiny tomorrow. Remember, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Start practicing these disciplines today. Apply these 5 strategies consistently. Create systems that make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. And watch as the quality of your life transforms one habit at a time. The power of immediate action. Don't wait to begin. Now, before we conclude, there's one more essential point we need to address, and that is the critical importance of immediate action. You see, the greatest enemy of change is not resistance, it's hesitation. It's telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow. It's believing that there will be a perfect moment to begin. Let me tell you something that might shock you. There is no perfect moment. The perfect moment is a myth. There is only now, this messy, imperfect, glorious now. Many people hear strategies like the ones I've shared today and think, that sounds good. I'll start implementing that soon. And in that very moment, they've already failed. Because soon becomes tomorrow, tomorrow becomes next week, and next week never comes. The cost of delay is enormous. Every day you continue with a bad habit is another day that habit gets stronger. Every day you postpone implementing these strategies is another day you're reinforcing the identity and the neural pathways you're trying to change. I remember speaking with a gentleman after one of my seminars. He told me he was going to use these principles to quit smoking, and he was very excited about it. But then he said, I'm going to start next month after this big project at work is finished. I asked him, how many cigarettes will you smoke between now and then? He did the math, about 600 cigarettes. That's 600 more reinforcements of the habit you're trying to break, I told him. 600 more votes for an identity you're trying to change. Is that really what you want? He started that day instead, and 6 months later he was still smoke-free. The truth is, there will always be reasons to delay. There will always be circumstances that aren't ideal. There will always be more information you could gather, more preparation you could do. But the most successful people in the world don't wait for perfect conditions. They create progress in imperfect conditions. They start where they are with what they have, and they begin now. So here's my challenge to you. Take one small action today, not tomorrow, not next week, but today, to implement what you've learned. Maybe it's starting to track a habit you want to change. Maybe it's replacing one instance of that habit with a better alternative. Maybe it's making one small change to your environment. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who could be an accountability partner. Maybe it's writing down the new identity you want to embody. Whatever it is, do it today. Because the difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do. And what you do today matters more than what you plan to do tomorrow. I have worked with thousands of people over decades in this field, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, the ones who succeed are not necessarily the ones with the most willpower or the best strategies or the clearest goals. The ones who succeed are the ones who start immediately and persist consistently. They understand that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. They understand that you can't change your past, but you can change your future, and the bridge between the two is action taken now. So as we conclude our time together, I want to leave you with this thought. Your life changes the moment you make a new, congruent, and committed decision. Not a wishful thought, not a good intention, but a decision that's followed by immediate action. The 5 strategies I've shared can transform your habits and by extension your life. But only if you use them, only if you start now. Will you face challenges? Of course. Will you have setbacks? Certainly. Will there be days when you fall back into old patterns? Absolutely. But each time you fall, you can choose to get back up. Each time you falter, you can choose to begin again. Because breaking bad habits isn't about perfection, it's about direction. It's about the general trajectory of your life. So decide today who you want to be. Decide what habits serve that vision and what habits hinder it. Apply these 5 strategies with immediate action and unwavering persistence. And watch as those small disciplines practiced daily accumulate into extraordinary results. Watch as the habits that once controlled you come under your control. Watch as the person you've always wanted to be emerges day by day. Choice by choice, habit by habit. Remember, the secret of your future is hidden in your daily routine. Change your habits and you change your life. Thank you.